There's a particular kind of confusion that spreads through a man's life slowly, like water damage through a wall. You don't see it at first. The structure still looks solid from the outside. He still goes to work. He still texts his friends. He still posts occasionally, smiles when he's supposed to, but something underneath has begun to rot. And the strange thing is, he can't quite name it. He'll tell you he's tired, or that work has been demanding, or that he's been stressed. But if you watch closely, if you pay attention to the micro decisions, the tiny surrenders, the way he holds his body when he's alone, you'll see something else entirely. You'll see a man who has quietly handed over the architecture of his life to someone who never asked for that responsibility. You'll see a man who mistook his willingness to sacrifice for a form of power, when in reality, it was the most efficient way to lose all of it. I work with men who come to me months, sometimes years, after this process has already started. They can't explain what went wrong. The relationship ended, or it's limping forward in a state of permanent resentment, or she's still there, but looks at him differently now, with something closer to pity than desire. And when I ask them what happened, they almost always say the same thing. I did everything right. I was there for her. I supported her. I changed my life to make her happy. And that's when I know they've confused love with leverage. They'd mistaken emotional investment for strategic positioning. They've taken the thing that was supposed to be an expression of their strength and turned it into the mechanism of their collapse. Niccolo Machiavelli spent most of his adult life watching men lose power they didn't even realize they had. He lived in a world where cities rose and fell, where alliances shifted overnight, where the men who survived weren't necessarily the kindest or the most passionate, but the ones who understood the mechanics of influence, perception, and leverage. He wasn't writing about cruelty for its own sake. He was writing about survival in systems that punish blindness. And one of his most dangerous observations, one that modern men have completely forgotten, is this: the moment you need someone more than they need you, you have already lost. Not because they're cruel, not because they want to hurt you, but because human beings, especially in the intimate theater of romantic dynamics, respond to scarcity, optionality, and self-possession. They respond to the man who could walk away, and the man who makes himself unable to walk away, who binds his identity and his emotional stability to one person's approval, becomes something else entirely. He becomes a supplicant, and no one respects a supplicant, least of all the person he's kneeling for. Let me say this as clearly as possible, because it's the spine of everything that follows. A man who organizes his entire life around securing one woman's love, validation, or continued presence will inevitably become the kind of man she can no longer respect, and the kind of man he can no longer recognize. This isn't a moral judgment. It's a structural reality. It's what happens when you mistake emotional exposure for strategic strength. When you treat love as if it operates on the same principles as friendship, loyalty, or fairness. It doesn't. Machiavelli understood that the systems governing attraction, respect, and desire are older than language, deeper than intention, and completely indifferent to how much you care. The man who ignores this doesn't lose because he loved too much. He loses because he loved without leverage. Here's what that looks like in practice. A man meets a woman. She's attractive, intelligent, and seems different from the others. For the first time in a while, he feels something. Hope, maybe. A sense of possibility. And so he begins to invest. He texts her first, consistently. He rearranges his schedule to see her. He cancels plans with friends because she's free that night. He starts imagining a future kids, a house, shared routines, and none of this feels like sacrifice. It feels like devotion. It feels like what a good man is supposed to do. But here's what he doesn't see. Every time he prioritizes her availability over his own structure, he's sending a signal. Every time he changes his plans to accommodate her, while she rarely does the same, he's announcing his position in the hierarchy. And she's receiving that signal, even if she's not consciously processing it. She's learning that he needs her more than she needs him. That he's willing to bend. That's his time, his attention, his mission, whatever, that even is anymore, are all secondary to her mood, her schedule, her approval. Now Machiavelli would tell you that this dynamic isn't inherently broken. Relationships require investment, they require presence. But, and this is everything, investment without optionality is not devotion. It's dependence. And dependence, in any system where respect and desire are currency, is a death sentence. The man who cannot walk away, who has made himself psychologically and emotionally unable to imagine life without this particular woman, has removed the very thing that made him attractive in the first place, his self-possession, his center, the quiet, unmovable fact that his life belongs to him first. Machiavelli wrote extensively about princes who gave away too much power too quickly, who trusted too deeply, who made themselves vulnerable in systems that reward strength, and the result was always the same. They were toppled, not by evil, but by the simple fact that they had made themselves indispensable. I once spoke to a man who had been in a relationship for 3 years. On paper, he'd done everything right. He'd supported her career, helped her move twice, paid for vacations, listened to her problems for hours, and rearranged his work schedule to match hers. He described himself as all in. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, she ended it. No warning, no long conversation, just, "I don't feel it anymore." And he was destroyed. Not just sad destroyed, because his entire emotional infrastructure had been built on the assumption that investment equals security, that if you give enough, care enough, sacrifice enough, you become irreplaceable. But that's not how it works. What actually happens is this: the more you sacrifice without reciprocal investment, the more you signal that you have no other options, that she is your only option. And the moment a woman perceives that, no matter how kind she is, no matter how much she once cared, the dynamic shifts. You are no longer the man she chose. You're the man who couldn't leave, and those are not the same thing. Let me show you how this process unfolds, because it's almost always the same. Stage 1. Denial and self-soothing. The man notices small things. She takes longer to text back. She's less enthusiastic about seeing him. She mentions other men casually in conversation. But he tells himself it's fine. She's busy, she's stressed, he's overthinking, and so he does what he's been taught to do. He tries harder. He plans a surprise date. He sends a long, vulnerable text about how much she means to him. He buys a gift. He initiates more, texts more, and explains more. And in his mind, this is love. This is commitment. But what he's actually doing is escalating his investment in a market that's already devaluing him. He's pouring energy into a dynamic where his attention has become expected, not desired. And the more he does this, the less she responds, not because she's cruel, but because he's stopped behaving like a man with options. He's behaving like a man who's afraid to lose her. And fear, in the realm of attraction, is repellent. Stage 2. Negotiation and self-abandonment. Now he starts changing himself. She mentioned once that she likes more spontaneous men, so he tries to be spontaneous, even though it doesn't come naturally to him. She said she values emotional availability, so he opens up more, shares his fears, his insecurities, his doubts. He's trying to become what she wants. But here's the trap. The more he molds himself to her feedback, the less he resembles the man she was originally attracted to. Because that man, the one she met at the beginning, had a shape. He had boundaries, routines, a life that existed independently of her. He wasn't performing. He wasn't auditing his personality against her preferences. He just was, and that self-possession, that groundedness, was the entire source of his appeal. But now he's negotiating his identity in real time, trying to solve her dissatisfaction like it's a puzzle with a correct answer. And she feels it. She feels the inauthenticity. She feels the desperation underneath the performance. And it repels her, not because she's shallow, but because human beings are wired to move towards strength and away from collapse. Stage 3. Total loss of frame. This is where most men finally realize something is wrong, but by then the structure is too damaged to repair. He's stopped seeing his friends regularly. He's let his body go. He's neglected his hobbies, his work, his purpose, if he even remembers what that was. His entire emotional world now revolves around her, her mood, her schedule, her level of interest. When she's happy with him, he feels alive. When she's distant, he spirals. He checks his phone obsessively. He rereads old texts, looking for clues. He drafts long messages and deletes them. He asks her if everything's okay, and when she says yes, he doesn't believe her because he can feel the distance growing. And the worst part is, she's not even doing anything wrong. She's just responding to the reality he's created, a reality in which he has made himself completely dependent on her, and she has lost all respect for the man he's become. Now let's zoom out. Because this isn't just an individual pathology, this is a systemic pattern, and it's accelerating. We live in a moment where men are being taught, explicitly and implicitly, that emotional vulnerability is strength, that sacrifice is love, that the willingness to center a woman's needs above your own is the highest form of maturity. And on the surface, this sounds reasonable, it sounds evolved. But it leaves out one crucial detail. None of this works if the man doesn't first have a center to sacrifice from. If he doesn't have a mission, a purpose, a life that belongs to him and him alone, then his vulnerability isn't strength, it's just shapelessness. His sacrifice isn't love, it's just the outsourcing of his identity. And the women who receive this, even if they claim to want it, eventually lose attraction to it, because what they're actually attracted to isn't the performance of sensitivity. It's the man who is sensitive from a place of strength, the man who can be vulnerable because he doesn't need to be, the man who can invest because he's choosing to, not because he has no other options. Machiavelli would say that the modern man has been sold a map of the world that doesn't match the territory. He's been told that desire is negotiated through virtue, fairness, and emotional labor, that if you're good enough, patient enough, understanding enough, you'll be loved. But desire doesn't work that way. Desire is a response to scarcity, mystery, and self-possession. It's a response to the man who has other options and is choosing you anyway. The man who could walk away but hasn't yet. And the moment you remove that possibility, the moment you make it clear that you can't walk away, that you're fully committed, that your life now depends on this working out, you've destroyed the very tension that kept the attraction alive. You've turned love into a form of debt, and no one desires their debtor. This dynamic is everywhere once you start looking for it. The man who stops going to the gym because she says she likes him the way he is, and then wonders why she's less interested 6 months later. The man who gives up his Friday poker nights because she feels neglected, and then notices she spends her Fridays scrolling Instagram, not with him. The man who shares his deepest fears because she said she wants emotional intimacy, and then feels her pull away the moment he actually needs support. These men aren't losing because they're bad men. They're losing because they've confused emotional compliance with strategic positioning. They think they're building safety, but they're actually dismantling the architecture of their own respect. Here's a detail most people miss. Women don't want to be your mission. They want to be chosen by a man who already has one. There's a massive difference. When a man has no mission, no purpose, no structure, no non-negotiable commitments, he inevitably turns the woman into his mission. She becomes the organizing principle of his life, and that feels heavy. It feels like pressure. She didn't sign up to be the meaning of your existence. She signed up to join a life that was already in motion. And the moment you stop that motion, the moment you reorganize everything around her, you're no longer the man she wanted. You're a responsibility, a weight, and shall either leave or stay out of guilt, and both options destroy you. Machiavelli knew that perception is more important than reality, that the appearance of strength often matters more than strength itself, and in the domain of romantic dynamics, this is brutally true. The slightly unavailable man, slightly unpredictable, slightly detached, even if he cares deeply, maintains leverage. Not because he's playing games, but because his life genuinely doesn't revolve around one person's approval. He has friends, projects, routines, and standards. He has a threshold, and that threshold, that invisible line he won't cross, is what creates respect. The man who has no threshold, who will tolerate anything, forgive anything, rearrange anything to keep her around, has accidentally turned himself into a servant, and servants, no matter how loyal, are never desired. If you're watching this and feeling the discomfort of recognition, if you've seen yourself in any of these patterns, then listen carefully. This isn't about becoming cold. It's not about withholding love or playing manipulative games. It's about understanding that love, real love, can only be sustained between two people who could survive without each other but are choosing not to. The man who needs her is not loving her. He's using her as a life raft, and she feels that weight. She feels the desperation underneath the devotion, and it kills her attraction, not because she's shallow, but because desire requires freedom. It requires the possibility of loss, and you've removed that possibility by making yourself incapable of walking away. So here's what sovereignty looks like in practice. First, notice when you're changing your plans, your body, your schedule, your personality, your values. Notice when you're doing this to manage her perception of you. Stop. The moment you're performing for approval, you've already lost your center. The sovereign man doesn't audition. He presents himself as he is and allows her to respond. If she stays, good. If she leaves, also good, because his life continues either way. Second, protect your time and attention like it's the most valuable currency you have, because it is. If she reaches out and you're in the middle of something meaningful, finish the thing. Text her back later. Not to punish her, not to play games, but because you're a man whose life has structure, and that structure doesn't bend every time someone wants access. The man who's always available isn't devoted, he's just empty. Third, stop explaining yourself. The man who over-explains is the man who's seeking permission. The sovereign man states his position, his boundary, his decision, and then lets her respond however she needs to. If she's upset, she's upset. You don't manage her emotions. You don't negotiate your reality. You allow her to feel what she feels while you remain who you are. Fourth, let her invest. Watch what she does, not what she says. If you're always the one initiating, always the one planning, always the one apologizing, always the one sacrificing, you're not in a relationship. You're in a one-side addition. The woman who respects you will meet you halfway. She'll invest time, energy, and effort. And if she doesn't, that's information. Don't argue with it. Don't try to convince her. Just adjust your investment to match hers and see what happens. Fifth, return to your mission. If you've lost it, find it again. What were you doing before you met her? What did you care about? What gave your life structure and meaning? Go back to that. Not as a strategy to win her back, but because your life requires a foundation that isn't another person. The man with a mission is inherently attractive because he's not desperate for validation. He's already building something, and she can either join that or not. Either way, he's fine. Now, let me show you two futures. If you ignore this, if you continue organizing your life around her approval, if you keep sacrificing without reciprocity, if you keep hoping that more investment will finally make you irreplaceable, here's what happens. 5 years from now, you're smaller. Not physically, there may be that too, but internally. You've trained yourself to defer, to apologize, to shrink. You've stopped trusting your own instincts because you've overridden them so many times to keep the peace. You're in a relationship that feels more like a hostage situation than a partnership. Or you're alone and confused, wondering why being a good man wasn't enough. You're bitter, you resent her, but really you resent yourself. Because somewhere deep down you know you gave away something you shouldn't have. And the worst part is, you're likely to do it again with the next woman, because you never learned the lesson. You never understood that love without leverage is just surrender. But there's another path. If you take this as initiation, if you accept that you've been operating from a broken framework and commit to rebuilding, here's what happens. 5 years from now, you're alone, more often, but it doesn't feel like loneliness. It feels like clarity. You've cut out the people who only take. You stopped performing. You've rebuilt a life with structure, work you care about, routines that ground you, friendships that don't require constant maintenance. You're in better shape. You're sharper. You've learned to sit with discomfort instead of medicating it with approval. And when a woman enters your life now, it's different. You're not desperate. You're not auditioning. You're just living, and she either fits or she doesn't. And that calm, that self-possession, that quiet sense that your life continues with or without her, that's what she feels. That's what creates respect. That's what sustains attraction over years, not weeks. The path of sovereignty is harder at first. You'll lose people. Some women will leave because you stopped bending. Some friends will drift because you're no longer available for low-effort hangouts. But what you gain is something most men never experience. You gain yourself back. You stop being a reactor, a people pleaser, a man whose mood is determined by someone else's approval. You become unmovable. Not because you're rigid, but because you have a center that nobody gave you, which means nobody can take it away. Let me say this one more time. In the simplest terms possible, the man who makes himself unable to walk away has already lost. Not because walking away is the goal, but because the possibility of walking away is what sustains respect. The woman who knows you'll stay no matter what she does, no matter how she treats you, no matter how little she invests, she doesn't feel loved. She feels burdened, and eventually, she'll resent you for making her the center of your life, because she never asked for that responsibility. You don't lose her because you loved her. You lost her because you stopped being the man she could respect, and you stopped being that man the moment you handed over your leverage, your optionality, your center, and called it love. If something in this hit you, if you felt the recognition, the discomfort, the truth of it, then don't let it disappear. Share it with the men who need it. Subscribe and keep this work moving, because most men will never hear this. They'll keep sacrificing, keep bending, keep hoping that devotion is enough, and they'll keep losing over and over without ever understanding why. Here's the last thing I'll leave you with. She does not destroy your purpose. She reveals its absence.